Hey everybody, Rosematter here. Welcome to part 13 of my Chaos Head Noah Let's Play. Last episode was pretty nuts, more so than usual it feels like. So after Shogun sent a little package, a little present to Takumi, which is apparently the severed hand of Nanami, and saying that if he wants to save his sister, he has to meet him at this tower. And then Shogun tells Takumi, it's like, okay, if you want to save Nanami, you have to find your D-sword. You have to be able to learn to summon it. And there was a whole crowd there with reporters and everything, calling him the Esper boy. All of this nonsense. So Takumi, trying his best, he saw the sword, but he wasn't able to actually grasp it. And he eventually just gave up and was like, I can't do it. I guess Nanami's going to die. But then he attacked Shogun, but it turned out to be this, I don't even know, it looked like some sort of super villain or something, and then that was it. That was the end of the episode. So what the heck is the aftermath of all of that? And there was also a thing of Nanami in a dark room saying I hate, you're the worst thing that ever happened to me. I'm assuming that was a delusion. That was just what Takumi assumed that Nanami was thinking. But Shogun himself said, how do you know that that's Nanami's arm? Kind of teasing him. So I'm guessing Nanami is alive. But yeah, the aftermath of all that, I have no idea what to expect. Only one way to find out. Let's jump back into the story and see what happens next. Despite midnight quickly approaching, the ticket gates of the subway's Hanzomon line were still filled to the brim with people. The earthquake had violently disrupted the public transportation schedules, and no one was even attempting to hide their frustration as they passed through the ticket gates. Employing a sidelong glance, Bon Yasuji inspected the monitor resting in the station attendant booth. The station staff had received a call yesterday during their morning operations. The caller had reported a high school girl wielding a gigantic bladed weapon was going on a rampage in the area. The police had been dispatched in response to this, but upon arriving at the scene, they found no trace of the girl, nor the man who had supposedly been attacked. Bon, who had happened to overhear the story earlier today, was very interested in the appearance of the male victim. Okay, interesting. So some people can see her weapon, I guess, other than, oh my gosh, why have I forgotten his name? Taku. I'll just call him Taku. I don't know why I blanked on his name. The fact that there had been several similar incidents had also caught his attention. This was why Bon was making an appearance here at such an hour. According to his sources, the incident had been captured in full on one of the surveillance cameras. When Bon asked the station attendant to show him the video, they willingly agreed but warned the detective the video was a little creepy. Is it because, there's not going to be any sword on the screen? Duly noting this, Bon elected to have them show him the video. The video was full of static. Maybe it's from the earthquake, Bon thought to himself. There had been various reports about the earthquake causing citizens to lose hard disk data, leaving Bon to wonder whether it was related. It would be difficult to identify anyone in the recording, as they were just barely visible. The recording featured a single man. He was standing by the wall in the far right-hand corner of the screen. The wall was located slightly far from the ticket gates, meaning passengers would not travel past it very often as they were changing trains. Incidentally, a few other passengers had just crossed in front of the camera. The man's appearance was hard to make out due to the fierce static, but he was fairly short and thin, and he was carrying a large rucksack. What exactly he was doing, Bon could not say. After about an hour or so had passed in the video, a small change occurred. A few people commuting to work were walking in the direction of the man, and then they swiftly stopped. To Bon it looked as if they had been drawn to the man with the rucksack. What was truly strange, however, was they did not even speak to him. They simply stood there in a daze. The people who had stopped did not seem to be acquaintances of the man. They were of different ages, sexes, statures. There was absolutely nothing they all shared. What in blazes was going on? Staring at the monitor, Bon tilted his head to the side, and, as he did so, a lone girl entered the frame. She had long hair and she was wearing a uniform from Sume Academy. The girl headed straight for the man with the rucksack in a manner that could only be described as exuding nothing but pure, unadulterated confidence. Her movements were entirely unlike those who had stopped before. Instead of halting, the girl pushed aside the people gathered there and seized the man by his collar. For a short period of time, the two of them argued about something. Rather than an argument, however, it was far closer to the girl simply screaming at the man without giving him room for air. Or at least, that was how it appeared. A few of the people who had stopped seemed to return to their senses and promptly left the scene. Eventually, the girl thrust the man away from her. The girl took a step back from the man who had fallen on his rear, then assumed a strange pose. She lowered her hips and brought both fists next to her ears. The girl looked as if she were holding something, but there was nothing in her hands. According to the reports, the girl had been wielding a large blade, but where on earth could she be hiding such a thing? The answer to that soon became apparent. Oh, so wait, so the sword does appear. Interesting, okay. So sometimes people can see it, sometimes people can't. Suddenly the screen, the camera shook. It was not static. The rustling hair and clothes of the passerby made it clear the surveillance camera itself was shaking. Now that I'm thinking about it, whenever she showed her sword... No, I'm thinking, I was like, was it all times that Taku saw the swords? Were they all, like, times where there weren't anyone around? But that's not true. There was the time where she was, like, right in front of Shibuya Station, and she had the sword, no one was looking at her, and then when she was walking around the street, she was holding a sword, and when she first, like, saw Taku and pulled the sword out, like, nobody paid any mind to it. Okay, anyway. Bond gawked at the screen, but maybe... Can Bond see it? Obviously, other people can see it as well because of the reports of a girl with a sword. He had no idea where she had retrieved it from, but the next thing he knew, the girl was holding a gigantic sword in her hand, one that was longer than she was tall. Bond asked for the tape to be rewound just so he could confirm what he had seen. But no matter what angle he examined it from, the sword appeared to have been conjured out of thin air. The girl had not moved a single muscle. She had remained in her hunched position the entire time. This much was undeniable. Bond's like, what's happening at Sume? First there was like the reports about the student at the scene of one of the crimes, and now this girl with the, you think that she would be at least trying to be more conspicuous and not wearing a uniform. The people in the video went into a panic when faced with the sudden appearance of the sword, but the girl did not seem to care about the people around her. The man with the rucksack, however, was very clearly terrified. He tried desperately to scramble to his feet and run away. But the girl would not allow that. With incredibly agile movement, she pursued the fleeing man and swung her gigantic sword as if it were light as a feather. In a manner akin to a violent windstorm, the sword tore the man's rucksack to pieces. The impact was so strong the man immediately collapsed to the ground. Despite this, he appeared uninjured. In fact, when the police officers had arrived on the scene immediately after receiving the call, they had not found even a single trace of blood. Maybe Bond will think, like, because Taku said, like, there was a girl in a Sume uniform. She was the one who killed that guy, so maybe he's going to be like, maybe it's her. Then, as if the girl had heard Bond's murmuring, something that should have been impossible considering it was recording, she suddenly turned toward the camera. The screen ever so slightly distorted. And the girl's figure disappeared in an instant. It was as if she had never been there to begin with. The man's shredded rucksack had been left behind, and the remnants of it were proof the girl had been there. It was hard to tell because of the static, but it was clear the girl had disappeared from the screen in less than a second. Bond rewound the tape again. There was nothing that seemed unnatural about the time displayed in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. In other words, the footage had not been edited. But if that were true, how could Bond explain the girl and the sword? Bond, feeling as though he had seen a ghost, could do nothing more than remain completely and utterly puzzled. A world of complete and utter white, and I was lying right in the center of it all. It felt as if I were floating, but I didn't know whether or not I actually was. I couldn't figure out what direction I was facing, not up nor down, not left nor right. The silence was deafening. It felt as if there were hundreds of insects buzzing around in my head at once. If someone were to tell me that this was the afterlife, I couldn't see myself contesting it. That was how monotonous, simplistic, tranquil, orderly, immaculate, empty, and peaceful the world was. Perhaps this was what the mind of Buddha was like upon reaching enlightenment. It was so incredibly different from my own mind. I wanted to stay here forever. The irritation that came with reality, the loneliness, the pain, the suffering. I didn't want to face any of it anymore. My thoughts began to cascade. I heard a noise burst into the white world that had previously been silent. The sound of a door being opened, and the sound of someone's footsteps getting closer and closer.
お兄、来たよ。いっしょ、いっしょ。お兄、お兄、今日ね、ナナね、いいもの持ってきたんだよ。はい、これ、プレゼント。
It sounds like it's Nanami, but it sounds like younger Nanami. Is this like a flashback to when they were younger?
エアミな帽子なんだよ。すごいでしょ、すごいでしょ。
Makes she sound so tiny.
もう冬だしね。ナナね、帽子好きだから、あんなの。使ってね。もう、お兄、無視しないでよ。ああ、ご飯残してるじゃん。せっかくのカレーなのに。ちゃんと食べないとダメなんだよ。ねえねえ、病院のご飯って美味しくないって本当？
Okay, so this is a flashback to like when he went to the hospital the first time?
でも食べないとダメ。起きろ、お兄。食べずに寝たら夜になってお腹空いちゃうんだから。
Someone's hand made its way under my back and forcibly shook my body awake. That was when I first realized that my eyes had been closed. Oh, it is! Little baby Nanami! Oh, even from like a young age she was like the doting type. When I opened my eyes, a little girl was standing there. It was Nanami, my little sister. But she was awfully little. It was Nanami from a long time ago. How long ago, I wondered. She must have been at least in elementary school.
はい、あーして。
The younger Nanami scooped up some curry with a plastic spoon, then offered it to me. And I slapped the hand holding the spoon. Even after all this time, I still didn't know what had been going through my head. But in that moment, I'd knocked away the tray of curry and rice with my hand and sent it crashing to the floor.
お兄、お行儀悪いんだ。お母さんに言いつけてやるぞ。
Nanami crouched down to the floor and picked up the tray I'd cast aside. She then retrieved a washcloth from the sink in the corner of the room and began cleaning up the mess I'd made.
ほんと、世話が焼けるな。ナナがいないと、なんにもできないんだから。
That's enough. I covered my face with my hands, then slowly closed my eyes.
ごめんね。あなたを守ってあげられなくて。
I slowly opened my eyes and saw a white ceiling. It was so bright it nearly blinded me. I blinked my eyes a few times. I tried to move my fingertips. I raised my hand in front of my face. The palm of my hand created a shadow. At last I was free from the blinding glare. I'd been dreaming about Nanami. Ever since I could remember, she'd had an especially strong will. After the bus accident back in elementary school, I'd stopped talking to anyone and everyone. But even so, that part of Nanami only became stronger and stronger. Unlike my parents who were simply overprotective and nothing else, she had taken care of me, all while remaining strict and firm. But that dream... Had I ever been hospitalized before? I'd gone in for checkups, sure, but, well, it was just a dream, so there was no real reason to take it, nor the contradiction, seriously. But he also seems to have a lot of lapsed memories, too. I was lying on a bed. It was a white bed with pipe frame. The sheets were white, the pillows were white. The linoleum floor was white, the wallpaper was white. Fluorescent lights on the ceiling were white, the curtains covering the windows were white. The small shelf next to the bed was white, the ceramic water pitcher was white, the paper cups were white. I was starting to get fed up with all the white. Mustering up my resolve, I attempted to sit up. For a split second, I felt a numbing pain jolt through the area around my waist, but it went away just as suddenly as it had appeared. The room was fairly large, at least twice the size of my base. But what really bothered me was how incredibly dreary it was. Maybe it was a hospital room. There was a pair of green slippers lined up right beneath the bed. I was relieved to find a color other than white. My body was moving just fine, and it didn't seem like I was dead either. I was thirsty. I wanted a cola, an ice-cold, carbonated cola. But there was no way I'd be able to find something like that in this pure white room. so I was forced to pour water directly from the pitcher into my mouth. It was a bit lukewarm, but it was enough to satisfy my thirst. I wonder what's up with this girl. Like, this nurse, is she here? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she was working for Nozomi and she was, like, keeping an eye on me. Upon finishing the water, I took a breath. The door then opened and a nurse wearing white scrubs came into the room. That was enough for me to confirm I was in a hospital after all. Like, the fact that she keeps being the one to take care of me, I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it was revealed that she was, like, some sort of shadow agent or something. Upon seeing me, her eyes grew slightly wide. She must have thought I'd still be asleep.
あら、西条さん、目が覚めたんですね。
But whenever I play these types of visual novels, anything that's like a psychological thing, I'm immediately suspicious of almost all characters. Facing me, she gave me a gentle smile, the mark of a true nurse. But something told me I'd seen this person before. Oh, I remembered her now. She was the grill. She was the girl who'd been at the hospital when I'd gone to see Dr. Takashina a while back. What had she said her name was? I couldn't remember, so I stole a glance at the name tag on her chest. Hazuki was written on it. Right, Hazuki-san.
お体の調子はどうですか?
Hazuki-san held out a thermometer to me, so naturally, I couldn't help but take it.
体温を測ってくださいね。
With how nicely she'd asked, I had no choice but to comply. My head was overrun with question marks, but I put the thermometer inside my armpit nonetheless. Immediately after I did so, a memory burst to life inside my head. I remembered what had happened. Back then, I had given up on saving Nanami. I had grabbed onto Shogun's wheelchair, but there had been no response. It had collapsed into a heap. And when I'd looked again, all I'd been holding was Darth Spider's helmet. Count Darth Spider, the very embodiment of evil in Spark Wars. His black-clad appearance was famous even in Japan. But I would have never thought that Shogun would cosplay as him, so my anger had been overridden by raw confusion. After that, I'd stood up and looked at the wheelchair, but there had been no one in it. Only a black hood draped over the back of it. That was another part of Darth Spider's costume. I'd then examined my surroundings one more time, but there had been no one there. I'd been the only one in that pitch-black rooftop. Suddenly the press then came flooding in all at once. They had surrounded me with lights, cameras, and microphones. I had no room to breathe. There had been more than 10 of them in total. I'd been so overwhelmed by it, my terror simply grew and grew. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't move a muscle. I'd been a total mess.
帽子はどうなっちゃったのかな。
結局ニュージェネの犯人は誰なのかわからないということですか。
そのダーススパイダーのヘルメットは何か超能力と関係あるのかな。日常さん、お題にくれませんか。これで終わりなんて言うなら電波ジャックですよ。
結局何がしたかったんです。ニュージェネに便乗した売名行為ですか。不謹慎だと思わないんですか。
ユーリ・ブライトマンさんとは最近話したかな。どんなこと話した。
Oh, Yuri Brightman. Who is that? That name's familiar.
知人とニュージェネについて何か関係あると思いますか。
その手に持っている美少女フィギュアは何らかの儀式的なアイテムと考えていいんですか。
このような行動を取ったことにはアニメやゲームの影響はあったのかな。日常さん、日常君。
The lighting pointed at me had been incredibly hot. It felt as if my skin was being singed by the sun during the hottest part of the summer. The flood of people from the media made me feel lightheaded. My field of vision had been spinning around in circles. I'd been cornered. I'd been panicking. I'd been unable to breathe. I'd grasped my head. I can't see anything. I don't want to see anything. I can't hear anything. I don't want to hear anything. I can't feel anything. I don't want to feel anything. At the very same moment I'd screamed, like a computer that had short-circuited, my consciousness had severed. Oof. I felt the same way. I'm like, that was very overwhelming to the senses. The question is, what about Nanami? What's going on with her? Is she okay? That was exactly what had happened. I'd lost consciousness. And then, how had I ended up here at the hospital? I couldn't remember. At the very least, I didn't think I'd come on my own, so maybe I'd been brought to the hospital by an ambulance. Hazuki-san was writing something on the clipboard she was holding. She must have had a slip of paper clipped onto it. Was she writing about my condition? I checked what time it was via the simplistic watch wrapped around her wrist. It was a little after 6 a.m. I'd slept for a really long time. I do a positive one. Are we going to get some sort of, like, perverted dream? Let's go for it. Regardless, why had I been brought here? If Hazuki-san was here, then that meant this was my normal hospital. It wasn't like me being brought to a general hospital was particularly weird, but something still didn't feel right. Why was Hazuki-san coming to check on me? That question really bothered me. Damn it, I hate when he's, like, thinking the same way I am, like there's something suspicious about her. I mean, Hazuki-san was a psychiatric nurse, but, you know, also given how Taku's been acting, it also wouldn't be surprising that a psychiatric nurse would be the one to check up on him. But the fact it's the same girl every time. If Hazuki-san was coming to check on me, didn't that mean the room I was in was also being used by psychiatric patients? Hazuki-san's eyes widened, and she moved in to study my face closely. Like, at all? What? She made it sound as if she hadn't expected me to wake up. Was she disappointed? Was she trying to say the world would be better off if a piece of garbage like me just stayed asleep for the rest of my life? When she said that to me, I really did start to wish I'd never woken up. But then Hazuki-san gave me an explanation that was far different than what I'd imagined. Whoa, what? What the hell? A month? When had I...
今日って。
落ち着いて聞いてくださいね。今日は10月28日です。
October 28th. That checked out at least with what I'd remembered, which meant that it had been a whole month since I'd witnessed the crucifixion. I was at a loss for words.
あ、そうだ。先生に伝えないといけませんよね。こんなにのんびり検温してる場合じゃなかったわ。
Wait, the crucifixion? I was like, but... She said it's been... So he's saying it's been a month since the crucifixion, but there's been a lot of stuff that happened after... I'm so confused. What? What if the doctor that initially saw him was alive? Like, was all of this just like... He's been in a coma since then and he imagined all of the stuff that's happened since?
ここで待っていてくださいね。すぐに先生を呼んできますから。
Dr. Nakashima? Is that his name? What if he comes in? I half expecting that to happen. After she finished rambling at me, Hazuki-san bolted out of the hospital room in a panic.
僕が1ヶ月昏睡状態だった。
Man, I'm really trying to think about the time and stuff. So he said a month since the crucifixion. I stared down at my palms, mumbling that to myself in a daze. That meant that everything that had happened in the past month had all been a dream. Didn't I say this, like, earlier in a previous episode? I'm like, what if all of this, like, never even happened? I couldn't believe I got slammed with the "it was all a dream" plot twist. But strangely enough, it didn't bother me. In fact, when she told me it was all a dream, it made everything surprisingly easy to understand. There was no such thing as a D-sword or turning delusions into reality or whatever else. All of it fell apart the second I actually thought about it. It had all been an illusion, a simple delusion that I had created. Except I know that there's like so much more of the story to go, and they're not just going to fall back on the "it's all a dream" trope. I was pretty sad that meeting Rimi had been just a dream too, but I wasn't being hunted by Shogun. I wasn't Japan's favorite punchline. And Nanami hadn't been kidnapped either. Oh, thank God. My vision blurred, but when I looked up to hold back the tears, Hazuki-san entered the room, and her eyes widened upon seeing me. Oh my God, now we're repeating. What? We're going in a time loop now. What the fuck? A gentle smile accompanied her as she said that. My confusion rushing back, I froze. Hazuki-san held out a thermometer to me so naturally I couldn't help but take it. As I took the thermometer from her, I gulped. It's the same. The exact thing from before was repeating. Now we're getting into Steins Gate territory here a little bit. It was as if Hazuki-san had just walked into the hospital room for the first time. I nervously reached for the thermometer in my underarm. I was sure I had put a thermometer in there just a minute ago, and yet there was nothing there. The thermometer had disappeared. Had it been just a delusion? When did the delusions end and reality start? Isn't that the big question I have for this game? Was me being hunted down by Shogun and becoming Japan's favorite punchline reality? My mood instantly took a turn for the worse.
昨日ご家族がお見えになっていたんですけど、西条さんの意識が戻らないので、日付が変わる頃にお帰りになりました。今日は診察時間が始まる頃にお母様が来るそうですよ。
I nodded in response, not having the energy to say anything back. Mom, I'm sorry for being such a disgrace. I'm an embarrassment to Japan. No, to the entire world. The entire thing had been televised, meaning it had already spread to the entire country. I was sure my shameful behavior had been uploaded to YouTube as well. I had no idea why I'd been made into the amazing Esper boy. And it didn't make any sense to broadcast my every move, and on the day of a huge earthquake no less, when I was nothing but a boring otaku freak. It wasn't normal. Because of that, I couldn't help but think everyone from back then was being mind-controlled by Shogun. But regardless of whether or not that was true, I'd still publicly humiliated myself. It wasn't something I'd escape after enduring a quick shitstorm online that'd be forgotten about in a week. Was this it for me? Would I no longer be able to live in peace? Suddenly, Nanami's face appeared in the back of my mind. I bit down on my lip and hugged my knees. Even if that was no longer attainable, as long as I could save Nanami, none of it would matter. Even if people from all over the world snickered at me and called me a pathetic loser for the rest of my life, it would make no difference to me. But I couldn't save her. I couldn't even do that much.
Nana.
Tears began to fall from my eyes.
どうしました？どこか痛みます？
And shaking my head over and over, I kept on crying. Nanami was dead. Nanami was dead, and she was never coming back. It was all my fault. All my fault. All my fault. Because of how worthless I was. Because of how much of a fucking loser I was. Nanami was dead. Because I couldn't grab that damn sword. Back on the rooftop, I'd given up so easily on obtaining the D-sword. I had Seraton's seductive voice in my ear, but that was just my pathetic self pretending to be someone else. I was the one who'd made the decision. This feels like this is the turning point, hopefully, where he's going to be like, I have to stop, you know, ignoring reality or like just going into my comfort, retreating into myself and just wanting to take the easy path. Like the fact that he's admitting that Sarah's basically just his self, just wanting to basically give up and just live his easy life. I'd made myself look like a pitiful victim. I'd chosen to sacrifice Nanami so I would survive. I hated myself. How fucking pathetic I was. If only I'd tried just a little bit harder. I told myself I'd given up of my own volition, but now that it was all over, I regretted every single thing I had done on that rooftop. I was absolutely disgusted with myself. She was gone. Nothing could save her now, and yet, even still, I couldn't help but think that if I could just go back to the rooftop and I just tried a little bit harder. Well, we've seen things just repeated, so maybe he can Steins Gate his way back to that night and be able to do it again. I mean, he can turn his delusions into reality, right? But I knew that even if I actually could go back, I'd just give up all over again, finding another excuse to get me out of it. That was just who I was, a completely useless, irredeemable piece of shit. At least he's a self-aware piece of shit, I guess.
ごめん。ななみ。
Hazuki-san rubs my back in an attempt to comfort me. I was a useless sack of shit to the very end. I was even causing problems for nurses that had nothing to do with me. The tears refused to stop.
何か後悔していることがあるんですね。でもきっと妹さんも許してくれますよ。
Huh? How did she know Nanami was my sister? Even that aside, the formulaic consolation she was giving me was the last thing I needed right now. I'm sorry, Hazuki-san, but no one else can understand how I feel. I hated myself. I was pathetic. I did nothing but take advantage of everyone else, and only ever thought about myself. The world would be better off without me. Maybe I should just end it all.
昨日もしきりに西條さんのことを心配していましたよ。
I figured when they said like a family member had come in to see you and it wasn't his mom, I figured it was Nanami, that she wasn't actually dead.
とても可愛らしい妹さんですね。
What was she talking about?
ナナミは妹は死にました。
I had a feeling Nanami wasn't actually dead. She had been kidnapped by Shogun, her hand had been cut off, and she'd been imprisoned somewhere. And in the end, she died all alone and afraid. When I imagined it, it felt like my heart was being torn into dozens of tiny pieces.
そうなんですか？ごめんなさい。勘違いしてしまって。
All my life, I thought Nanami was annoying, although we had been siblings for 16 years. Even though she'd called me a jerk more times than I could count, she was always worried about me. The reason why she'd always nagged me so much was because she'd been trying to help me break free from my toxic lifestyle. Whenever she'd brought me food from our parents' house, she didn't just give it to me and leave. She'd always tried to share it with me. Normally, if a girl her age had an otaku freak for a brother, they'd never associate with him. And while the things she'd said didn't make her the easiest person to be around, she'd still talk to me, and she'd listen, too. Whenever I'd been at school, she never avoided me. No, she would actually approach me. No matter what, Nanami had always treated me, a vile otaku freak virgin, like her brother, like a human being. Her mere existence had helped me more than I ever knew. But realizing that did me no good now. It was too late.
でも、だとしたら鬼ってどういう意味なのかしら。
Huh? I looked up, unable to properly comprehend what I just heard. As my eyes were blurry with tears, I couldn't see Hazuki-san's face properly. What had she just said?
眠ってる西條さんを鬼と何度も呼んでいたから、その印象が強くて。
There was only one person who called me that.
それ本当ですか？
Vaulting out of my bed, I pressed Hazuki-san for an answer.
はい、何がです？
ナナミがナナミがここに来てたんですか？
いえ、はっきりお名前を聞いたわけでは。
僕のこと鬼って呼んでたんですね。
ええ。
ナナミは今どこに？
ですから昨日はお帰りになりましたけど、西條さんのお母様と一緒に。
怪我とかしてませんでしたか？
はい。いえ、特には。
元気だったんですね。ナナミは元気だったんですね。
はい。いえ、ナナミさんかどうかはわかりませんけど、昨日いらしていた女の子は元気そうでしたよ。
Nanami was alive. From everything Hazuki-san had said, it had to be true. I sat down on the bed, utterly dazed. You know what? I have to learn not to trust the game. Like, everything seems cool now, and I'm sure she is fine. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was a twist like, jokes, that actually wasn't Nanami, and none of this is actually real, and she actually is dead. I don't think that's the case, though. But how? Shogun had said he wouldn't give Nanami back to me until I completed his quest. Had he just released her out of pity? Maybe. Maybe before he lost consciousness, somehow he got the D-sword and he fulfilled his request or something and doesn't remember. Or had Nanami escaped on her own? But then, how would that explain the hand that had been sent to me? According to Hazuki-san, Nanami hadn't even been injured. But Shogun had said himself, like, who's to say that that's Nanami's hand? You don't know that. Exactly. What if it was Reimi's? He thinks all's good and then, like, Reimi's missing her hand. What he'd said, it hadn't been a lie. He'd played me. I'd been dancing right to his tune. Shogun had deceived me. No, it didn't matter right now. I see. So that was it. It was all coming together. Nanami had never been kidnapped at all. Back when I'd been at O-Front trying desperately to grab the D-sword, Nanami must have been relaxing back at home reading manga or going out to karaoke with her friends so she could show off her shitty singing voice or doing whatever else she liked to do. Like a true brother, even when he's like happy that she's okay, he can't help but get a little jab in at her. I was crying, but I couldn't help but laugh.
西条さん
将軍にまんまと騙された。なんという壮大な釣りだよ。
It'd be funny if Takumi was just like, well, now that none of that stuff happened, I can continue to be a piece of shit and not improve on myself. Now that I know that Nanami's okay. She was alive. Nanami was alive. I could see that bratty-ass face of hers again. I could hear that obnoxious, shrill voice of hers again. The mere thought was enough to bring me a deep sense of relief and an intense joy that rose from the bottom of my heart.
よかった。
I couldn't stop crying, but the tears weren't tears of regret I'd been crying earlier.
よかった。
I was an utterly useless pile of shit, but I couldn't help it. The day before, I'd given up without being able to do anything. But even so, as long as Nanami was alive, I didn't wish for anything else. The whole world could mock me until the end of time for all I cared. I was overjoyed. Thank God she was safe. Interesting that was the positive one. So there was no little, like, the wavy thing here. So I'm wondering, like, if I had chosen the negative one, would she had said all that stuff about Nanami being alive? I don't know. Yet another meeting had been called in the main conference room of the Shibuya Police Department, joining one of multiple others that had been held today. The exhausted, fed-up detectives all wondered how many more hours worth of unproductive meetings they'd be forced to sit through. Matsunaga was about to start hearing the reports from each investigator when, suddenly, Bon hesitantly stood up and raised his hand.
ちょっといいですかね。
なんだね。
Inquisitive eyes and expressions landed on Bon not just from Matsunaga, but from Suwa and the detective sitting next to him as well. Bon smiled his usual flippant smile, quickly bowed his head, then looked around the room.
先日インターネット上に投稿されたいわゆる集団ダイブの映像についてなんですが、実はちょっとした発見をしまして。え？
The surprise on Sua's face was evident. In all likelihood, he was surprised. After all, Bon had examined the video without saying a word to him. It was not because he wanted to keep it a secret from him, however. No.
バン警部補。君は確か貼り付けの捜査担当だったはずだが、なぜ集団ダイブについて調べている？
This was the reason. Bon had disregarded the orders he'd been given by his boss, the head of the investigation team. If Bon had involved Suwa, a promising new detective, his partner would have inevitably been harshly rebuked by his boss. Bon wanted to avoid this.
まあ、とりあえず見てくださいって。
With a chuckle, Bon took out 2 enlarged photos from a file he had in his hand and attached them to the blackboard with magnets.
これはどっちも集団ダイブの現場となったコーネリアスタワー屋上の写真です。右の写真は例のミュウツベ投稿映像から抜き出したもの。左のは昨日の夜、私がタワー屋上に行って撮ってきたものになります。
Interesting. Okay.
何か違いに気づきませんか？あ。
The entire conference room began to
背
stir.
景がね、違うんです。投稿映像のカメラは北東へ向かってる。5人が転落したのが北東だったから間違いない。で、映像では3分29秒から約15秒間、カメラが左右へ大きく触れるんですが、その時に東に向いた時の映像がこの右側の写真なわけです。コーネリアスタワーの東、つまり六本木方面ですね。東京タワーが夜景の中にしっかり映ってる。赤いから目立ちますね。でもね、もう一つよく目立つものが映ってないんですよ。
Bon's eyes narrowed as he combed his beard with his fingers, and then a wry smile appeared on his lips.
六本木ビルズですよ。
It was true, the lights of Roppongi Bill's could not be seen in the photo he had taken from the uploaded video. But in the photo Bon had taken the day prior, the lights of Roppongi Bill's many windows were very clearly visible along with Tokyo Tower.
で、たまたま見つけたんですが、コーネリアスタワーのホテルロビーにタワー完成当時のパネルが展示してありましてね。そのパネルの一つがこれ。
Bon retrieved a new photo from the file and pinned it next to the previous two. It was also a picture of the Roppongi area taken from the rooftop of the tower. But it was not a picture taken at night, it was one taken at day.
六本木ビルズが映ってますよね。建設中ですが。
The commotion in the conference room grew even louder. Matsunaga, meanwhile, remained silent as he stared at the photo with a stern expression.
コーネリアスタワーの完成は2001年。六本木ビルズの完成は2003年。タワー完成当時の写真では、当然ながら六本木ビルズは建設中で、まだ高さもほとんどない。だが、集団ダイブが起きたのは今年2008年だ。映ってなきゃおかしいですよね。六本木ビルズ。ちなみに投稿映像に細工された形跡はなかった。
つまり何が言いたいんだ。
Having seemingly lost patience with the detective, Matsunaga urged him onward discontently.
非常に言いにくいんですが。
まさか先輩、この映像が撮られたのは2003年以前、つまり5年以上前って言いたいんですか？
Dang it, Sua. Bon's shoulder slumped. He's like, I want to draw this out a little bit. Bon's shoulder slumped dejectedly. The young detective's keen insight was brilliant. Sua had said exactly what Bon had intended to say. However, having it said aloud and in such a straightforward manner only made the claim appear all the more dubious. Alright, let me go back. Go to the backlog and just... Saying the video was taken before 2003 means it was taken more than 5 years ago. Ugh. The fact that in this world, 2003 was only like 5 years ago. Oh man, so long ago. Bon's careful planning on how to articulate his points had been all for nothing.
バカバカしい。小説の読みすぎではないがね。映像に映っている被害者5人の顔は一致しているんだ。あれが5年前のもののはずがない。そんなつまらないことを調べている暇があったら、聞き込みの一つでもしたらどうだ、警部補。
ああ。
今のは聞かなかったことにする。それと、後で話があるから会議が終わったら残りたまえ。
After letting out a short sigh, Bon gave up and sat back down. He's like, I had them in the palm of my hands. Damn it, Sua. Well, it's not like I expected them to believe me. Bitter and unwilling to accept defeat, Bon muttered that inside his head before returning to listlessly fanning his face with his handheld fan. And yet, despite all the work he had done, if one were to ask what the absence of Roppongi bills in the video signified, Bon would be unable to answer. After I'd found out that Nanami was alive, the doctor came to me and asked me a few simple questions. They wanted to make sure whether or not I was well enough to leave. I answered the questions to the best of my ability, then opted to leave the hospital before my mom came back. After that disgraceful behavior I'd shown off in front of the entire country, how was I supposed to face my family now? Damn it, I thought that the doctor was going to come in. It was going to be the one that Takumi was talking to before. And if Nanami were to come back, I knew I'd be so happy I'd immediately burst into tears all over again. And then, since she wouldn't know why I was crying, Nanami would then take it seriously and start yelling at me not to worry about her. Probably while calling me an idiot, too. When I thought about that, I nearly fainted from the sheer embarrassment, and so, instead of letting that happen, I decided to employ strategic retreat. That's just going to make his family worry more that he basically checked himself out and just left and didn't tell them about it. A nurse brought in the most disgusting breakfast of all time, and after chipping away at it slightly, I snuck out of the hospital room. I made my way down to the first floor and then into the lobby. The clinic hadn't opened yet, so the lobby that was usually packed with old people was completely deserted. I confidently walked toward the front entrance. Luckily for me, the automatic door opened, giving me free rein to exit the building. And he's not telling anyone he's leaving. That's not gonna... Ugh, that's just gonna worry people more. The hospital staff might have gotten angry with me for leaving without asking them first, but I had to stay away from the hospital until everything calmed down. As for the medical fees, I left my mom a note telling her to go ahead and pay for it, so it should be fine. Wow. Despite the fact I'd stayed overnight at the hospital, I wasn't exhibiting any actual symptoms, and my mental state was doing much better after I'd learned Nanami was alive. Making sure to keep an eye out for any ambushes by Shogun or Yua, I quickly made my way back to my base. I'd made it back. My mental state had done a complete 180 since I'd last been at my base. Of course, I was feeling a lot better now. If only I could have let my past self know that. You let yourself get baited far too often, mate. I rate 8 out of 8, lol lol lol. There's no reason for you to get so riled up, dude. Nanami's fine, lol, foo-hoo-hee times 100. Or something along those lines. Thinking back on it, yesterday really had been a living hell. Everything had just gone to shit. I'd gotten a weird phone call in the morning. Then there'd been an earthquake. Then the data on my hard drive had disappeared. Then I'd had to witness ISA try to off herself right in front of me. Then I'd got an email from Shogun. Then he had sent me a severed hand. A severed goddamn hand. My mood plummeted in an instant. With a gulp, I turned my attention to the fridge. Is the hand still going to be there? Is the box going to be there? Oh, that's where the hand is. Before I'd left yesterday, I decided in my maniacal state to just put the hand in the fridge for the time being. If I'd left it out somewhere, it could have started rotting. The smell of blood was also way too strong for me. There was all sorts of sci-fi anime and movies where as long as they remained frozen, people could stay in a state of suspended animation for hundreds of years. So that was pretty much what I was going for. I thought if I could keep Nanami's arm fresh, she might have been able to get it surgically reconnected when she was back home safe. So this is like Schrodinger's fridge. Either the hand is in there or it's not. And I feel like depending on what's going to happen, it's just going to throw everything into chaos. But if that wasn't Nanami's hand, then who the hell did it belong to? And how would that explain the cell phone and the bangle? If I wasn't missing something, then it had to belong to Nanami. When I'd called her, it had rung on the cell phone held in the hand. Or maybe it had been just a part of Shogun's trap. Was it even possible to make such a perfect replica of Nanami's arm?
もう一度確かめてみるべきかも。
In truth, I really didn't want to. The entire hand thing grossed me out. Just thinking about it made me want to puke, even if it did belong to Nanami. But that didn't mean I could just keep it in my fridge forever. Not even my supply of cola stayed that cold in it. I considered asking the police to come take it, but then I realized that they'd just suspect me of being the NewGen culprit, even more than they already did. So if the hand is in there, he's gonna have to find a way to get rid of it as well. It would practically be suicide to dial 110 and go, "Hello, yes, please come and take this person's severed hand off my hands, thank you." What should I do? Should I just throw it away? But supposing it was Nanami's arm, it didn't sound like a good idea to throw it away. Hell, were you even allowed to throw away human hands like that? Did they constitute as burnable or non-burnable trash? I tore at my hair. There was no point continuing to torture myself over it. I'd just go ahead and check one more time that the bangle was on her wrist, and that she was holding her cell phone. Was it Nanami's, or was it someone else's? That was the question I hoped to answer. So interesting, like, my thought would be, like, would the hand be in there at all? But he's, like, so sure that the hand is there, but he's just not sure if it's Nanami's. I stood in front of the refrigerator and gripped the handle. I closed my eyes, and then I took 1, then 2, then 3 deep breaths. Unsurprisingly, the temptation to just call Remy and ask her to do it for me crept up into my mind, but I quickly shook it away. No matter how good of an ally Remy was to me, there was no way she wouldn't freak out upon finding someone's hand in my fridge. And then, if I managed to fuck up the explanation, she'd fall out of love with me and turn me into the police. I was gonna have to do this on my own, somehow.
くそ。
I clenched my teeth, took 2 more deep breaths, and then I yanked on the handle with all my might. And it's not there. The fact that he was so sure it was going to be there, I'm like, I bet it's not going to be there. Oh, what happened? Did it freeze? Uh-oh. I think the game froze. What a time for the game to freeze. This is freaking me out, actually. I'm almost waiting for something to jump out at me. Fuck. I have to restart. Damn it.
あれ
It was empty. Entirely empty. I thought for sure that I'd put the hand in there yesterday. It'd been wrapped in aluminum foil. It should have been on the top shelf. And yet, there was no sign of it. All that was there were a few bottles of cola and a bunch of rotten clementines. Nothing else.
消えた。なんで
Just like that, it was completely gone. I crouched down and looked farther into the refrigerator, but of course it still wasn't there. There wasn't much in there to begin with, so it was already practically empty. There was no way I could have missed it.
昨日ここに入れたよな。
Or maybe I just assumed that, and in reality I'd left it somewhere. I closed the fridge door, then looked around my trash-filled room.
段ボールもない。
A large cardboard box with a hand inside of it. What had I done with it? I felt like I'd tossed it in the corner of my room or something, but either way, my memory of last night was very unclear. More things had happened yesterday than my poor brain could handle, and everything was made all the more brutal due to the utter chaos of it all. Calm down, just calm down, and get your thoughts together. Think of why it might have disappeared. Okay. I booted up the word processor on my PC and wrote down all the possibilities I could think of. Okay. My mistake, I put it somewhere else in my room. I myself took it out yesterday and threw it away somewhere. Shogun took it back. The police searched my house and confiscated it. The mass media broke in and stole it. The hand never existed in the first place. My base had been unlocked ever since yesterday, so if someone really wanted to, they could have come right in and taken it without much trouble. That would also be consistent with how Shogun had been able to put the hand in my room in the first place. Or maybe it was number 2. My memory of when I'd left my base to go to O-Front was unclear. The feeling that I had to save Nanami, seeing the severed hand, how terrified I was of Shogun, all those emotions swirled around me, invading each and every corner of my mind. I couldn't calm down at all. Maybe I had just left my base and tossed the hand in a dumpster somewhere without knowing it. Or maybe the whole hand thing in general had just been a delusion, and it didn't actually exist at all. But when I went to check my email, I found the one I'd gotten from Shogun yesterday did in fact exist. And in that email, he clearly stated the hand was a present. Ugh, I'm all mixed up now. So we have the whole thing about apparently he's been in a coma since the crucifixion thing, so none of this stuff should have happened. And yet he's got the email from Shogun. Not to mention that Shogun himself had talked about it yesterday. I just couldn't believe that it had been a delusion. Okay, then what about the possibility the police or media took it? Those people looked at otaku freaks like we were no better than shit smeared on the bottom of their shoes, so it wouldn't surprise me. After everything that had happened yesterday, I was afraid to look at the internet. And yet, in the end, I couldn't help myself, so I clicked open my browser. I bet there's nothing about anything that happened yesterday about the Esper boy and about all that stuff that happened. First, I checked the news section on Taboo, as well as the news sites I would typically go to. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, never mind. There is articles about it. What? I'm so confused. Sure enough, there were articles upon articles about the uproar yesterday at Scramble Crossing. Now I'm like extra confused. So he was apparently in a coma this whole time, and yet all this stuff actually happened. Okay. Is the radio wave hijacking Esper just a boy who cried wolf? Okay, let's see. Let's try and read this. Okay. When faced with the disappointing end to the show, the nearly 5,000 fans that had crowded in front of Shibuya Station all began to boo loudly for over an hour, with some fans even fighting among themselves. The situation resulted in 13 separate arrests. The commotion began with a prank email sent by a boy, hereby referred to as N, living in Shibuya Ward. At first, news stations were skeptical of the email, which claimed the boy was a clairvoyant Esper who could see the culprit behind the New Generation Madness, the popular name for a series of brutal incidents taking place in Shibuya. However, when American psychic oh, that's right, Yuri is the psychic detective. However, when American psychic detective Yuri Brightman, age 43, informed Today TV and Fujisan TV he would be willing to become the boy's legal guardian, both stations immediately took him at his word, or so the story goes. What in the world? The boy starring in the show N did not turn out to be an Esper. He repeatedly riled up the audience by motioning like he was going to jump off the building, but his performance did not extend beyond that. Undeterred, the media companies dared to go up on the rooftop to report on the situation. So all that stuff that happened apparently with him getting confronted with the, the media, that apparently actually did happen. Okay. Then again, this all could just be a delusion as well, all this stuff on the internet. Who frickin' knows at this point? The media companies dared to go up on the rooftop to report on the situation and attempt to get a comment about the NewGen incidents, but they were unsuccessful. The boy was found collapsed on a rooftop, holding a moe anime figure and a costume from a popular Hollywood film. According to otaku culture expert Professor Hashiba Yoshiro of Meisei University, there has been a rapid increase in the number of young people who dream of becoming heroes, but in the pursuit of this dream act with no regard to the world around them. Under the influence of anime, video games, and other similarly damaging media, they've lost the ability to distinguish between fantasy and reality. This is likely what is causing them to act in such a way. They require psychological care. So that's why he was brought to the psychological hospital. I hadn't sent any emails to the media. I'd never even seen Yuri Brightman's show, let alone met him. What in the world? So what the hell? Was this all just part of Shogun's plan like I originally thought? We do know... Actually, do we know anything in this game? But there was that instance of him, like, sleepwalking, and he, like, went on the internet and was posting on @channel, right? Maybe he was the one who sent out the email himself. What was his ultimate goal here? He'd said something about it being a quest or something. Okay, then what was the point of having the mass media televise me trying to get my hands on a sword? I didn't get it. What was Shogun trying to accomplish? He'd even released Nanami alive. I followed the links to various articles, but even after reading through all of them, not a single one of them mentioned Shogun. Geez, if he's going to be going back to school, that's going to be really weird, because, like, I'm sure they know exactly who he is. They probably figured out. I'm surprised there wasn't a bunch of, like, media outside the hospital when he left. There had been practically no gap at all between when I tackled Shogun and when the media had come bursting onto the rooftop. Even if Shogun had managed to escape during that window, the media would only... There is that Nozomi group. They do control the media to some degree, right? So who's to say they don't have a hand in this? Not only that, but Shogun was supposed to be stuck in a wheelchair. He was supposed to be paralyzed, so there was absolutely no way he would have been able to escape the rooftop in such a limited time frame. I went on to check @channel, and to no one's surprise, an enormous shitstorm was going on. My real name was being plastered everywhere. Oh god, I feel bad for him. The uniform that Nishijo dumbass was rocking is from Sume, isn't it? Are there any Sume students in the thread? The guy's a terminal fucktard. Do us all a favor and off yourself, you piece of human trash. Nishijo, you need to chill the fuck out. Fuck's sake. It'll be all your fault if Otaku start getting beat up again. They found him carrying a figure. It was a goddamn Sarah Bloodtune figure. What the fuck? And just like that, Otaku freaks around the world have just shed a tear. This Nishijo fucker should have just stayed inside like the shut-in he is. TV's not for him. Sarah would be like, Nishijo, you big dum-dum. Time for me to kick your fat butt with my awakened form rocket body blow attack. Everyone was just saying whatever the hell they wanted to. They weren't even considering how I felt as they talked all this shit about me. Having @channel as your enemy was a scary thing. And it was all Shogun's fault. I was in this mess. I was wondering if anybody had leaked any sensitive information onto @channel. The stuff that couldn't be aired on TV. But I couldn't find anything that fit the criteria. I hadn't been alone on the rooftop. There had been one more person, and yet not a shred of information had come out about them. It was almost like the being known as Shogun had never been there in the first place. Maybe the Shogun that appeared on the rooftop was just an illusion. Maybe, even if I know for a fact he exists, there's a possibility the Shogun I saw at O-Front was just a delusion I created. You think you're losing your mind just now? You just realized this? There were so many things happening that shouldn't have been possible in real life. It was more like a video game at this point. Like there were two worlds, one where Nanami was alive and one where she was dead. And the two options were running parallel to one... Oh god, we're dealing with parallel worlds now too. Running parallel to one another, meaning I got to choose between them, just like a choice you'd find in an eroge. The future was divided into countless different branches. So he's just going to start playing his life, he is in a video game. Maybe he's just going to break away from it. He's like, if I just treat this like a video game, I can manipulate the world in the way that I want to. What made me, and it's funny too, because there are the options where I can choose the delusion. So like I am making the choices. What made me different from normal people was I could simulate what story events might occur using my delusions, and I was in the middle of simulating the route that... I love this! it's like a self-aware character that he is aware that he is in a game where like choices matter, and he's gonna just decide like, I'm gonna make the choices that are gonna lead me to the good ending. But he doesn't really have all the choices because I get to still make some choices. Like, I'm the one that's looking at him. Whose eyes are those eyes? I'm the one who's looking at him. I'm making these choices behind the scenes. But do those delusions really make that much of a difference? Maybe not. Okay, I was in the middle of simulating the route that would lead to the bad ending. Like one where Nanami died, or one where Ayase jumped to her death, or one where I fell off O-front and died. In other words, it's funny because I kind of did have that happen. We did have a bad ending. The only time so far, I think, where I could actually make a choice that led to a quote-unquote a bad end. For some reason, all these things you'd normally find in the bad ending route could be coming after me, almost like they were hunting me down, due to a trap I myself had set. Maybe I just had the desire to leave behind my boring, uneventful life and go to a more exciting world, like one from a game. Because of that, I'd been unconsciously showing myself what that would look like. That couldn't be it. I didn't have any desires even remotely like that. Or at the very least, I would never want to make myself go through anything that made me feel sad or scared, simulation or not.
いうか、どれだけ想像力豊かなんだよ。
You think that if he, like, truly had that ability, he would just put himself in the ESO, like that would be his dream. Be the hero. What I'd been considering was nothing more than some childish bullshit delusion I'd come up with without thinking. I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and looked up at the ceiling with a blank stare on my face. Reality isn't set in stone. Anything and everything just felt fake. The world I was living in was completely hollow. That certainly took an interesting turn. Like, even more so than usual, like, with this game, I have no idea what's happening. Oh, woman in her 20s found dead in Shibuya River of Shibuya Ward on October 28th. The woman died of asphyxiation after consuming the flesh of her own right hand and choking on a bone that lodged itself in her throat. Okay, so that's not Nanami. Nanami's not in her 20s, so at least she should be fine. All right, what name are they going to come up with this one? Probably another very insensitive name.
被害者は江戸川区に住む十勝あやみさん27歳で、死因は喉を詰まらせたことによる窒息死とみられています。警察の調べによりますと、被害者の右手の肉が削り取られて骨が露出しており、また胃の中からは人間の肉とみられる内容物が見つかりました。被害者は自らの右手を噛みちぎって食べたとみられ、また足首が紐で縛られていたとのことです。警察では自殺・他殺の両面から捜査を進めています。
Oh my gosh, finger food. Wow, it's even more insensitive than I thought it was going to be. Ever since the seismic intensity 5 earthquake, the city of Shibuya had been overwrought with an air of pure bloodlust. The sense of order in the city had been visibly deteriorating. This decrease in security was not only regarding fights among young people, but the increasing number of store windows being broken, as well as a large surge in theft. The media continued to use the term new generation in order to establish a feeling of crisis and entrapment. And in response to such fear-mongering, a handful of stores had abruptly ceased operations. In addition, a group calling themselves the anti-NewGen had suddenly transformed into a riotous mob during one of their weekly demonstrations, charging the Shibuya police station and resulting in the arrest of over 100 people. Much like the Esper Boy riot, thousands upon thousands of curious onlookers gathered in the area in order to enjoy yet another shitstorm. So I wonder if this is like Nozomi, they're kind of like sowing discourse in the population to kind of like throw off, I don't know, like the balance of, you know, like the police, and just to cause an uproar and to cause chaos, and then they can like take over. It seems to be some sort of like political thing, and also like for them to control the world, basically. There is a striking difference in excitement between those who were visiting the city and those who lived in it. The former expected Shibuya to be more brutally eventful than ever, while the latter condemned the lawlessness of their home and insisted on strengthening police authority. Then, as if to mock all the uproar, the 6th NewGen incident occurred, and of course the perpetrator had yet to be apprehended. It had been a week since the earthquake, and in that period of time I had been suspended from school. Even if I hadn't been suspended, I wouldn't have been in the proper mental state to go to school anyway. The day immediately following the earthquake, another NewGen incident had occurred. That incident, just like the murder of Dr. Takashina, was obviously supposed to send a message to me. It was a woman who had bitten off her own right hand. There was no doubt in my mind it was supposed to allude to Nanami's severed right hand. Nanami was clear bait from Shogun to lure me out, but even though I knew that, the thought that Nanami could have been the one killed sent shivers down my spine. Since I had become famous in Shibuya in the worst sense of the word, I was now more terrified of going out than ever. If I had a hole to crawl into, I would have done it with no hesitation. Even going to the convenience store to buy food for myself killed me, and there had been entire days I went without eating. It was impossible for me to walk outside with my head not glued to the ground. Does, Remy still exist in this world? Can you not just ask Remy maybe to bring him some food or something? It always felt like someone was laughing at me. The gazes of other people terrified me. I didn't want to talk to anyone, to see anyone. People from the mass media had been trying to bother me constantly, but I ignored every single one of them. I hadn't called my parents, nor had I talked to Nanami. I hadn't been playing ESO either. If it somehow got out I was 9 hard, I would be absolutely fucked. It had been 1 week now. Was that enough time for everything to cool down? People always say, oh, they'll forget about it in a month, but hopefully it didn't actually take that long. And I mean, trends did go by extremely quickly these days. The slang people used would become obsolete by the next year. Even net slang and memes that people used online died out in just a couple of months. Television sought out heroes, idols, villains, or whatever else that would excite the public. As soon as it found them, it consumed them for all they were worth and promptly discarded them. Even the NewGen cases, which had been going on for 6 cases now, were quieting down. No one even talked about the first case on @channel anymore. Everything faded from people's memories in the blink of an eye, which was why I was hoping that in the past week everything that had happened to me had already faded from the public consciousness, just like some passing trend. Even if it was just wishful thinking, I couldn't help but hope it might be true. My head and stomach started to pang. I sat down on my usual bench and calmed myself down. Serotonin would know what to say right now.
そんなに苦しむぐらいならもう学校になんか行くのやめればいいっしょ。
I was at the point where I was starting to consider it. I mean, due to the worsening security, more and more people have been opting out of school in Shibuya wards, so it wouldn't just be me. And I'd always thought it made no difference whether or not I graduated, so much so that I'd been willing to drop out of school right now. But despite that, I still plan to continue going, even if it meant risking running into Yua. I gulped down a cola I'd bought at a vending machine on the way to the park, then stood up from the bench. I should just stop kidding myself. I didn't want to go to school, but I didn't want to quit it either. Because if I quit school, I wouldn't be able to see Remy anymore. We were classmates, so as long as I kept going to school, I'd be able to see her without going out of my way to do so. But if I lost that, I could always just call her or go meet with her directly, but like I said, that'd mean I'd have to go out of my way to contact her. And I knew for a fact I couldn't do that. Okay, that answers my question. I'm like, why not just call Remy and just have her hang out with you? In fact, I already hadn't been able to bring myself to see her for a while now.
私が一緒にいてあげる。
He's probably wondering, like, why didn't she come to visit me? You know, if he was out of school for a week. That was what Remy had promised me, and I hadn't heard from her for over 10 days now. Not a single word. Like, the last time I think we actually saw her, and not just in a delusion, she was outside the hospital when Aise was brought in after jumping off the roof. The thought that Remy, my one and only ally, might have fallen out of love with me after seeing my disgusting behavior on TV, it destroyed me. I was terrified. I felt like crying, and I had never felt so alone. No one, not even Nanami, had come to see me. I was being subjected to thread after thread of endless slander on the internet. I was scared shitless by even the idea of Shogun and Yua. And while I'd said before I didn't want to see anyone, the loneliness was eating away at me. I wanted Remy to come and see me. I wanted her to hug me gently and tell me it would all be okay. It must have been so hard, but I'm here now, she'd say. In the end, Remy had spoiled me rotten. But she wasn't in the wrong for doing so. Remy had taught me the warmth that 3D could have. And now that I knew what that warmth felt like, I never stopped wishing for it ever since. I couldn't get that kind of peace from 2D or delusions anymore. I couldn't survive on just my delusions. I wanted to see her. That's very brave of him, actually. I can't believe he's actually going to school. When I'd passed through the school gate, I hadn't noticed any particular change in the atmosphere. That is to say, no one had noticed me. I entered the building and started up the stairs. A girl I didn't recognize went to pass me, but just before she did, she let out an audible "ah" and looked at me with pity in her eyes. I walked into the hallway where my classroom was located. Several windows were broken, and I could feel people's gazes mercilessly burning through me as they whispered. At that moment, I was hit with a very bad feeling. My wishful thinking was already on the verge of shattering to pieces. But even so, I opened the door to my classroom, fueled by my one desire, to see Rimi. I bet she's not going to be there. The silence lasted for about 10 seconds. Everyone was frozen. They all stared at me. I kept my head down as I walked through the quieted classroom and took my seat. As if on cue, a DQN sitting in the last row, whose name I didn't know, spoke up.
Oi, Nishijo! 超能力見せてくんね
And with those two sentences, time started moving again in the classroom.
それ言ったらかわいそうじゃねだって有利が認めた男なんだぜそうそう俺テレビ見てたぜすげえよあのやらせ超能力者
西条もどうせやらせなんでしょ。
大きい人形と小さいお人形を抱えてただけだもんね
やめとけって西条は病気なだけだっつうのそっとしといてやれだってあいつ空飛べるらしいじゃんあとなんだっけ投資
私投資されたらどうしよう服もスケスケで裸見られる
西条変態じゃん。
おやっべこっち見た石にされる前に目をするぜ大丈夫実際のところただの肝だから
I wonder if he's gonna, like, unleash his powers here and be like, I'll take care of these DQNs. And where's, what's the guy's name? I've forgotten his name, shoot. Mishimi? Where is he? This is hell. This was exactly what I'd feared the most. The DQNs had their eyes on me now. It'd been a week, but no one had forgotten about the uproar I'd caused. I was now the laughingstock of Japan. The boy who, after trying to show off his special powers to the masses, went home and slept with a figure. There was no point in protesting, saying I'd never called myself an Esper. The truth was meaningless now. Right now, the truth was just the one story that everyone in Japan was familiar with, a story that tens of millions of people recognized to be truth. There was no fixing that. No one could. Not me, not anyone on TV, not even Shogun. I was a self-proclaimed Esper who no one would ever associate with. I was an absolutely revolting male otaku, the biggest freak anyone had ever seen. Not a single person would ever look at me with anything other than disgust. I'd always hated TV shows that made fun of otakus, and now I just added fuel to the fire. I didn't have any psychic abilities. I couldn't fly, I didn't have clairvoyance, I didn't have telekinesis. I couldn't obtain a D-sword. I'd even given up on trying to save my sister just so I could save myself, like the complete piece of shit I was. I was just an otaku that had nothing to show for his life other than his knowledge of anime, video games, and whatever other media. So it only made sense I couldn't do it. I fought off my imminent mental breakdown and searched for my savior, Rimi. And when I did, my eyes met Misumi-kun's. Only for him. Oh, is he gonna, like, not associate with me anymore? To immediately look away. I guess that was only fair. If you hung out with me, the entire class would shun you too. That was why he'd looked away. It was only natural. Besides, he and I had always lived in two different worlds. I was an otaku and he was a total alpha male. It was a marvel we'd even been friends at all. Feeling like I was on the verge of tears, I went back to scanning the room. I searched for anything I could latch onto. I desperately cried out in my mind for Rimi. But she wasn't there. Rimi was nowhere to be found. Why? Was she just absent? Of all times for her to be gone, why now? I didn't have any way to get a hold of her. What if she never came to school again? If that happened, I'd likely never see her again for the rest of my life. That was the feeling I got. It was like that when she first appeared, too. Back on the first day I saw her at school, Rimi was suddenly in my class, just like that. And now she disappeared just as quickly. Could she have gotten caught up in the earthquake? Could she be dead? I tried my best to shake off all those negative thoughts, but it was hopeless. I was just getting more and more depressed. And now my mind was being overwhelmed by an incredibly dark and foreboding delusion. I was starting to wonder if the girl known as Sakihata Rimi had ever existed at all. Maybe she was just another personality I created inside my delusion, like Seraton. That's my thought, but if he's thinking it, now I'm like, maybe that's not the case. When I thought of it like that, it all started to make sense. Whenever I needed help, Rimi always came to my rescue, like a knight in shining armor. Whenever everyone else would treat me like an otaku freak, would treat an otaku freak like me like trash, Rimi would treat me with kindness. Had I seriously believed there was a 3D girl that was just so damn perfect for me? Someone that was pretty much my dream girl? And the fact that she looks like Sarah as well. Oh, okay. I had no reason to come to school anymore. My one and only reason was gone. Alright, we went with the positive one last time. Let's go with the negative one. Let's just make him spiral even more. I really was completely alone, just like I'd always been. I'd always been completely and utterly alone. I started to cry inside my head. It took everything I had to just keep myself from crying in real life. That was all I could do to try and at least maintain some semblance of pride, but that was all it was. A semblance. I tried as hard as I could to just keep my head down, grit my teeth, and stay in my seat. Even though I didn't want to hear them, I could hear all my classmates talking. I wanted to run away, but I was too afraid that would only make things worse. Every last one of you should just die. Ooh, is he gonna have a delusion where everyone does die? I had nothing left to lose, so why not just die doing what I love to the very end? For example, screaming, lifting a chair in the air and attacking a DQN with it. It would feel great to finally give those assholes what was coming to them. Oh, is he gonna do it right now? I stood up in a relaxed manner. The DQN bastards were still smirking at me like always, unaware of the divine judgment that was about to befall them. I casually lifted up my chair. Holding it above my head, I approached the DQN who had first started making fun of me. My sudden actions caused the DQN to freeze, grin still on his face. I swung the chair down without a moment's hesitation, hitting the guy square in the head. I felt the chair collide with his skull. The DQN collapsed on the spot, and a puddle of blood spread out beneath him before I could blink. For a moment, the classroom was completely silent. And then all hell broke loose. Every boy and girl screamed, looking at me with fear in their eyes, then turned and ran for their lives. The DQN who had collapsed at my feet was no longer moving. I swung down the chair with all my might, once again. The DQN's body spasmed, but he didn't make a sound. He had likely fainted, or perhaps he was already dead. I started to feel a little scared. If I stopped here, who knows when he'd get up and start attacking me instead. He was a DQN, so he might even be carrying a knife in his backpack. I'd already given up on life, but I didn't want the end to be painful. I had to kill him. I couldn't stop until I was sure he was dead. I struck the DQN's head with a chair 3 more times. Then again. Then again. And again. And again. While still slumped down in my seat, I lost myself in that delusion. That felt pretty damn good. A gory splatter flick had played out inside my head. How I'd love to just beat them all to death right now. The more I thought about it, the more I felt the urge to do it. Maybe the moment I did something reckless like that, the simulation of the bad end would end and the world would then reset. I'd then return to the original world where I could make different choices. Rimi would be there. Misumi-kun would be talking to me in his normal, over-friendly manner. Everyone would have completely forgot about my shameful behavior. No one would be making fun of me. Oh my god, the idea of him, like, just intentionally going off the rails to trigger a bad ending. Maybe I should try it. Oh, the center of my head felt fuzzy. I felt kind of feverish. Was this that fever you got before obtaining some new knowledge or power? Or was it some delusional fever? I didn't have a specific name for it, if it was. Well, not like it mattered. Maybe I should try it. Even if I couldn't return... Did I trigger this by picking the bad option, or would this have happened either way? Even if I couldn't return to the original world, people would just think I was crazy. No, they probably already thought that, so it really didn't matter. It wasn't like I had anything to lose. A week ago, back when the nurse had told me Nanami was still alive, I'd thought that, as long as Nanami was alive, nothing else mattered. Even my life didn't matter. I didn't care if I was treated like some freak and sent to the nearest hospital. It'd be nice if I ended up in the same one as Ayase. Where had Ayase been admitted to, I wondered. Was it that penitentiary-looking hospital that she'd used to be in? Even that would be fine. Hell, that'd even be slightly better than being in this school without Dreamy. The urges within me bubbled like magma. I could no longer control them. I slowly... Oh god. Oh no, what's about to happen here? I slowly stood up. Oh no. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Everyone in the class stared at me and their expressions stiffened. Don't look. There was no reason to look at a worthless piece of shit like me. Suddenly, I heard a girl's voice. Not only that, but it sounded straight out of an anime. I don't know if that doesn't sound like Sarah. I wonder if it's that little girl, the girl with the pigtails, who's like we've barely seen. Who the hell was talking to me? Oh, is she like, because the first time like we interacted, she kind of like what's the word? Like telepathically talked to me apparently. Who the hell was talking to me? I looked around the room one more time. Everyone was frozen in place due to my odd behavior, but they all kept their mouths shut. I couldn't find a single human being who was talking. But that voice, it was such a strange sensation. It felt like it was coming from directly inside my head. Was it an illusion? Or had I just crafted yet another delusional girl inside my head? Huh? What was that just now? They were responding to my thoughts. Was someone reading my mind? No, it had to be just a delusion. Yeah. What was yeah, Kozue or something like that? When I shouted, my classmates moved farther away from me, almost like they were trying to run away in fear. The voice didn't answer my question. All the voice did was continue to talk to me in a really strange way. That means that she probably just heard what she sensed my delusion I had of just like killing that guy. A shudder ran through me. Goosebumps sprang up on my skin. In an extremely cheerful tone, the voice then said, "You're like, we should kill all of them." Yep. I love how it's the cute little, like, moe-looking girl, right? That's actually the one who's super violent. Please, no more. I cowered in my seat, cradling my head in my hands. The world hadn't reset. I hadn't returned to the parallel world where Rimi was. Okay, we know about parallel worlds here, right? A different world that exists parallel to ours in another space-time. It exists in the same dimension as the world we live in, and in some cases, the locations of people and other things residing in it are completely identical. Rather, it was like I'd gone completely and utterly crazy. It had been a week since Bon had last visited the Frisia office, and things were a little bit different than he remembered. The seas of paper that had been piled high atop each and every desk were now completely absent. They had likely all come crashing down due to the earthquake, and Momose had ordered it to be cleaned up. Because of this, the place looked quite tidy. Staring at it with a sidelong look, Bon let out a sigh, then sat down on an office chair he'd wheeled out from beneath a desk. He restlessly fanned his face with his favorite handheld fan. Momose, who'd been tapping away at her laptop's keyboard on her desk, took one look at Bon's dismal appearance and scowled.
"Nani? 来るなりため息なんてついて."
なあ、ももちゃん。何にもないとこから剣が出てくるって手品見たことあるかい？
そう。手品なんて詳しくないから。
じゃあ、瞬間移動は？
箱の中に入ってとかそういうこと？
いや、そうじゃなくて。
一体何が言いたいわけ？宴会芸でも覚えたいの？
わかんないならいいんだ。多分関係ないことだからさ。
変な人ね。
Momose shrugged her shoulders, then took a bite out of the kinsuba pastry Bon had offered her.
どうぞお茶っす。
Suo brought over 2 paper cups. Steam billowed from the green tea that had been poured into them.
あら悪いわね、すばちゃん。お茶組なんてさせちゃって。今日美穂ちゃん風邪で休んでて。
いや大丈夫っす。
With a cheerful smile on his face, he handed Momose and Bon each a paper cup. Suo had been taken to the office once before by Bon while they worked in another case. Ever since then, Suo had come to look up to Momose as his mentor rather than his more direct superior, Bon. Momose also seemed to enjoy Suo's company, and she tended to speak to the young, honest man with a far kinder language than she did. Well, she calls him Chan, right? Like, it's a term of affection. That's cute, though. It's like an odd friendship.
それより何の話してたんすか？
どうやったら父兄に受ける宴会芸を覚えられるかって相談をな。
はあ、そりゃ興味深いっす。
すわちゃん、こんなダメ刑事なんかといつまでもつるんでちゃダメよ。もっと優秀な上司に就くのおすすめするわ。でないとあなたの出世街道が断たれちゃう。
まるで俺が出世絶望的みてえな言い方だな。
事実でしょ。悔しかったらもっと真面目に仕事しなさい。
してるんだがな。
Ignoring Bon's frown of disagreement, Momose held out the box of kinsuba to Suo.
すわちゃんも食べて。
あ、どうもっす。
言っとくが、それは俺が自腹で買ってきたもんだぞ。
先輩、いただきます。
When he saw his subordinate bow his head and reach for the kinsuba, Bon let out yet another sigh.
それより二人ともこれを見て。
A line graph appeared on the laptop screen. It had a gently undulating curve that rose and fell like the tide. Suo, who had circled around behind Bon, peered at the graph and cocked his head.
これ何のグラフっすか？
ここ1年の渋谷近辺の G レートよ。おかしいと思わない？
渋谷の平均 G レートが世界的に見ても高いってのは、ももちゃんに教えてもらったんだぜ。
そうじゃなくて、気のせいかもしれないけど、G レートが何者かによって操作されてるような気がするの。
そんなことできるんすか？
さあ。でもグラフを見ると、なんだか不自然なのよね。数値が小刻みに変動しすぎてる。10年ぐらい前まで遡って調べてみたんだけど、ここ5年ぐらいはずっとそんな調子なのよ。
前に太田教授だっけか、その人が言ってたなんだっけ、 G レートが半年前から増加してるとかなんだが、その辺と関係あんのかい？
太田教授の調査では G レートはそんなに細かい変動は起こさないっていうことなのよ。
何らかの異常が起こってて、そこに人為的なものを感じるってことか。
でも5年っすよ。それだけ続いてれば異常じゃなくて正常な状態と言えなくもないんじゃないですか？
もう一つあるの。グラフを細かく調べていくと G レートは毎週末に伸びる傾向にあるのよ。
週休2日のサラリーマンにはありがたいこったな。俺には関係ねえけど。
ああ、土日に休み欲しいっすね。自分もう2ヶ月休みなしっすよ。
The two dejected detectives hung their heads, to which Momose responded with a curt shake of her own.
茶化してる場合じゃないわ。1週間ごとに定期的に変動してるのよ。しかも年末年始やお盆休みなんかは変動がピタリと止まる。何かの意志が働いているとしか思えないわ。
年末年始やお盆休みがあるのって人間だけだよな。動物や植物はそんなもんあるわけねえもんな。
実は地球の意志とか。
地球の意志、ずいぶん壮大な話だな。だがもし仮にそんなもんがあったとして、地球が明けましておめでとうとか言うかや。
冗談っすよ。
年末年始はともかくお盆休みは日本にしかない風習よね。
日本人の社会活動と同期しすぎてるか。
渋谷っすから当然なんじゃ。
ちなみにこことここ見て。
Momose first pointed at the center of the line graph, then to the right where the most recent data was situated, most recent date was situated.
この2箇所はすごく伸びているでしょ
一番右はこの1年の最高記録みたいだな。
う。1年どころか、この10年で最高よ。
日付は
真ん中は3ヶ月前。覚えてる？小さな地震があったでしょ。
震度3でなぜか8人も死んだ。あれか。あの犠牲者ってなんで死んだのか理由はまだ特定できてないんじゃなかったか？
さあ、そうでしたっけ？
Ignoring the exchange between the two detectives, Momose continued talking.
で、一番右はこの間の地震の日。
おお。
あの日、大規模な電磁波が発生したのは知ってるわよね。
渋谷中のコンピューターが壊れたらしいな。俺はアナログ人間だからよくわからんが。
自分も自宅のノーパソがやられたっす。復旧してる暇がなくて。
あれは地震の影響で電磁波が起きたって言われてるけど、真相は全く逆かもしれない。電磁波の影響で地震が起きた。
おいおい、そんなことテレビや新聞じゃ言ってなかったぞ。
あくまで私の推測だけど、この2つの地震は天災じゃなくて人災かもって思ってるの。だってどっちも普通じゃないもの。前の地震では震度3っていう規模なのに8人も亡くなってるし、そして今回は震度5で118人。
死にすぎって言いたいのか？
さっきバンちゃん言ったでしょ？亡くなった方の大半は死因が不明って。そんなの尋常じゃないわ。
まあ確かに。
それに空が白く染まったっていう噂もある。
そういえば時間が経つにつれて全く報道されなくなったな。
マスコミに何らかの圧力があったのかもね。
まさか。
明和党か。
おそらくそうよ。
マジっすか？
明和党とつながりのある企業団体を洗うべきかもな。
もうやったわよ。
さすがももちゃん、相変わらず仕事早いね。で、
Momose raised her hand skyward and stretched far and wide, tilting her head slightly to the side. A satisfying pop sounded from her bones.
それらしい当たりはなし。お手上げよ。
お手上げってももちゃん。
やっぱももちゃんさんの推測が間違いなんじゃ。
そうかもしれないわね。これでも結構時間かけて調べたのよ。本業そっちのけでね。でも行き詰まっちゃったわ。よほど巧妙に隠されているか。スワちゃんの言う通り、私の推測が見当外れでしかないのか。
こういう時は別の方向から攻めてみるってのがデカの鉄則だぜ。
先輩、なんか心当たりあるんすか？
Han stopped the hand that was fanning himself, then wet his lips with his tongue.
週末に G レートが上がって得するやつって誰なんだろうな。
All right, guys, that was it's just getting more and more confusing. The whole thing with like apparently Takumi was actually in the hospital for a month. And he was in there starting from the first murder, the crucifixion. No, that wasn't the first murder, was it? But the crucifixion murder, the one that he saw. And then apparently he's been in a coma since. So apparently, like, realistically, all of that stuff that has happened to him since then shouldn't have happened. And yet, there's the emails from Shogun. People, like, remember him being on the rooftop. There's, like, people saw him do that. Rimi's gone. And like that was also the first time he saw Rimi was at the crucifixion scene. So like, does that have any significance? I have to assume if he saw Rimi there, and then shortly after that, apparently he's been in a coma. I'm like, my head hurts. Like, I don't really have a good grasp on what's going on. I never really did, but it just feels like with that whole thing with the, you know, if you could just write it off as like, oh, he was just in a coma the whole time, none of it happened. But apparently some of the stuff that, you know, actually did happen. And then there was the woman who was just found murdered right after he apparently came out of the coma, who ate her own hand as a kind of nod to Nanami. So I'm sure he's on the right track with it being related to what Shogun was saying about like with Nanami and the whole thing with the arm. And then that girl seemed, the Kozue, I believe is her name, like now she's popped up again and she can speak telepathically. And she's saying like, we should kill them all, and you're an amazing person, and don't listen to them. Yeah, I'm so confused. And then that thing at the end, like when they're saying like, who benefits from the GE rates being higher on weekends? I don't know if it should be an obvious answer to that, but like I can't think of like who are they referring to. Yeah, I'm just left a little bit dumbfounded after all of that. I don't know what to think of. It's just a lot to take in. A lot to take in, a lot to think about. I feel like there was some other information that seemed pretty important, but I can't quite remember what it is. I'm just trying to like make sense of everything, but I feel like that's kind of impossible right now. But that is going to do it for me, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned next week for episode 14. Until then, bye. Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Revealing Storm, Lynn's VA, Kenju Storm, and iCognito.